Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and since my Doll Family A practice head recently arrived, today I'll be continuing my testing of Arteza's watercolor pencils for face-ups. Not long ago, I shared how these pencils worked for a vinyl fashion doll, and now I'm tackling how they work on resin. There's a little bit of a difference in how they work, but let's get to it. I've started by sealing this doll 3 times with Mr. Super Clear, which is the most commonly used sealant for BJDs. I start with strokes that are pretty light because I don't know how much pressure I need to use to lay down a line with these, and the answer is not very much. I thought I'd have more of a faint sketch outline here, but from the beginning the color laydown is really bold. One thing about these pencils that has continued to impress me is that they have a really creamy sort of texture, which is super unusual for watercolor pencils. But this means that the color laydown is not just intense, but it's really smooth. I wasn't sure if the smoothness I got on the last experiment was just because I was working with a vinyl doll, which has a smoother texture than a resin BJD, but that doesn't seem to be the case. They're just really, really smooth pencils with a great consistency. I'm not jumping in for a serious face-up at first here, because there are a few things I want to try out. So right now, I'm just seeing how different amounts of pressure change the shape and intensity of the lines, and also seeing how it feels when I lay down different shapes in different areas of the doll's face. My pencil is probably not as sharp as it should be, since I didn't resharpen it after the last test, but I want to see how far I can go before it's totally unusable. So if I had started with a freshly sharpened pencil, I would get finer lines than these, but what I'm getting are definitely not disappointing for a first layer of color. Typically, when using watercolor pencils for BJD face-ups, I've found that lashes in particular tend to be really gritty and grainy, and take 6 or more layers to build up into smooth lines. That doesn't seem to be the case with these. There's still a little graininess that you get just because it's a pencil and not paint, but I can't imagine it would take more than 2 or 3 layers to have a smooth, solid lash line. For sake of experimentation, I also laid down some pinks and peach tones. As I expected, they lay down just as smoothly as the brown pencil I started with. No texture variance, which is really nice. Normally, you'd seal a doll after this base layer of color, but I'm still experimenting here, so I grabbed my black pencil next, and I try layering it on directly over the brown pencil I just put down. With pencils I've used before, you can't layer colors over colors without sealing in between the layers, which can make blending difficult. That doesn't seem to be true of these. Not only do I have no trouble putting the black pencil on directly over the top of the brown on the same layer, but it blends really smoothly too. So this will be great for laying down bold colors. Poor Robin looks a little bewildered here. Let's just add to the bewilderment. This poor doll is gonna suffer so much. The next thing to test is how erasable the pencils are. Shaping brows and neatening lashes with an eraser is a pretty standard part of face-up work. Here's my normal stick eraser I've been using lately. I use a really light amount of pressure and the edge of the eraser, and it does a great job of removing the extra pencil to tidy up the edges of the brow. It doesn't work quite as well for the lashes, and that may be because of using multiple colors on one layer. I'll show you why I suspect that in a minute. But it's also totally possible that it's just the nature of darker colors, because they're always more likely to stain, and that means staining sealant too. Where it's just the brown up on the brow, it seems to erase just fine. So now we'll see how well it wipes off with water, because I reshape lashes and brows all the time as I work on face-ups. The pink line on the lower lip comes off without leaving a trace. That's pretty typical of lighter colors. The edges of the lashes clean up nicely with water on a cotton swab, but when I wipe all the eye makeup, it doesn't come off quite as well. However, this is not unusual for watercolor pencil. Anytime you remove really intense color, you can expect to see a shadow of it left behind in the sealant. You can see the black brow leaves a shadow too, but it's actually not as bad as the side where I layered colors together. And since I said I'd show you, I grabbed my eraser to see what happens to this residue. Unlike where I was erasing the lashes where it was 2 colors used together, the places where it was just 1 color erase really easily, and that includes the residue left behind after the water. If the color of the pencils was all that mattered, this shouldn't have budged when the layered eyelashes wouldn't. So I wipe everything down with a wet cotton ball just to make sure I've gotten everything that water will take off. And then last is the heavy duty removal, which is a magic eraser, also known as a melamine sponge. These sponges are extremely fine grade sanding and work better wet. But you want to use it very sparingly, because too aggressive of scrubbing could scrub right through that base layer of sealant, and we don't want that. If you have to clean aggressively to get marks off from a wiped brow or something, you may want to respray before trying again, just to be sure your doll is still thoroughly protected. But with these, it only takes some very light wiping with the sponge to make every hint of pencil color disappear. Now that I know what to expect from these pencils, it's time to goof off. One thing I noticed over the course of working on this doll is that the pencils seem to dull a little faster than they did when I was working on the Monster High doll. But I don't know if that's because of the texture of the resin, the fact that resin is harder, or just because the doll I'm working on is bigger. But a single turn with the pencil sharpener is all that's really needed to bring the pencil back to a super sharp point. And if I did a better job of keeping it sharp, I'd probably be better off. I'm only going to be doing 1 layer of a face-up today, but I'm really impressed with how far these pencils let me go in just 1 layer. I combined some blues and purples and used gray and white for accents. One of the things I found most interesting was that, while it seems to be a pretty duh statement that the darker colors can be layered over the lighter stuff, you can actually layer the light pencils over the dark without needing to seal the layers in between. When I use the white pencil to accent the brows and add lashes and things, it goes on super easily and plenty bold, as if it were going on a fresh layer of sealant instead of going on over the top of darker pencil. That's pretty great. Because of my bad prior experiences with them, I feel like using pencils for brows is a weakness for me, so these don't look great, but normally you'd use several layers to build up a nice shape anyway. Once I've got basic lines down, I grab my pastels and do a normal amount of blushing over the top of the pencils to see how they interact when unsealed. This is important to know for blending applications. The pencil marks don't move, and the pastel also doesn't cling to them, and it doesn't fall right off them either, which would also be a problem. Instead, I can layer pastels right over the top of the pencil marks, just as if the lines were paint instead. And the pencil also goes on top of pastels super easily, without lifting the color or blending into weird shades. None of the pastel dust sticks to the tip of my pencils. So this is 1 layer of a face-up, and that's as far as I'm going, since I'm just going to wipe this off to test the next material anyway. While I'd normally do another 3 or 4 layers before calling this done, I've seen enough of these pencils to know that I really enjoy using them on resin as well as vinyl, and the control the pencils give me over things like lashes make them super appealing for future work. While there is a bit of visible graininess, it's not as bad as other pencils I've used, so it wouldn't take much to build up to a nice, smooth finish. The graininess is best seen in this extreme close-up. Nobody's ever going to be looking that close at my dolls. But that's it for this round of testing. All in all, I think these pencils are excellent for resin dolls as well as vinyl, and they're moving to the top of my pencil shelf. That's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.